welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you like to hang out here. Today I am finally doing the so necessary, oh my goodness, hi, the incredibly necessary things I hate in books video. This type of video helps you guys get to know me a little bit and understand my reading taste, so maybe it's easier to recommend books or even just understand my reviews and ratings to begin with. So we're just gonna jump in to the tropes that I do not like, as well as my anti-buzzwords. So I've got a list. This probably won't be as like beautiful and organized as a lot of people do, because I've just been finding things and writing them in my notes as I think of them. I've seen a couple other videos, maybe for inspiration, and here's the truth of the matter. I don't know why I dislike books. I can't exactly explain it. It's often just like the vibes or the characters or something. But there's a few things that I really dislike about books. There's a lot of things I love about books though, so get ready for that one next. But a lot of these are just your typical things to not like in a book. So for example, conveniency, motives, things like that just bother me. I read a lot of fantasy, and so books that are just too convenient sometimes can get on my nerves. It's not a make or break for me, but it will probably knock it a star, if not at least a half star, because like, make your characters work for the plot. Don't just make it convenient and easy for them. Similar with motives, like I want my characters to have a clear understanding of like why they want to do something and like how that's going to impact them. I can't stand, and this goes for villains too, but I can't stand when like someone's just good or just bad for the hell of it. Like, give me a reason, give me motives. If they're doing something that's like against their motives, against their character development, I want to see that and I want to understand them better through it. I want to see them making hard decisions and have a feel for it. And sometimes I just think that characters do things for the plot that just don't make sense to who they are and how they've been written. So those things can get on my nerves. Now, another thing that can get on my nerve is the miscommunication trope. This is very popular, especially in romance, the third act conflict, the big breakup. Often miscommunication is in relations to the characters just aren't talking. They're not explaining themselves, they're not able to open up for whatever reason, and I don't mind some miscommunication, but it has to be done well. I think you can add miscommunication and make it a real conflict without it being they just should have told each other how they felt or something like so dumb, something that could be resolved in one small tiny conversation. That's a bad miscommunication trope. But if your characters are miscommunicating about something, it's not inaccurate to life. But I think authors can benefit from going a bit deeper with their miscommunications and like the reasoning behind it, because I feel like a lot of it's just thrown in there because like romance needs a third act conflict, which maybe that's why I'm not a big romance reader. But I think it can be done right. I just don't know how often that is because I don't read a lot of romance, but I think it is accurate. Like, I'm really bad at opening up and being vulnerable and sharing things, so I can to a point understand it. Okay, and the last like writer thing that I just want to mention is info dumps or world dumps, where the author, typically in fantasy or sci-fi, just give you all the information, just spill it out of them. And I understand to an extent having to have lengthy explanations for world building or giving us the lore of something so that the reader understands a bit better, but so many times it is just done wrong. I think you can have conversations with characters and get a glimpse of the world that way, but at the same time, show me the world without being too descriptive. I don't want 3 paragraphs about the trees in the forest. Like, tone it back a little bit, but it's a hard balance. And I haven't written a full-length novel, so what do I even know? But at the end of the day, I don't want to have to sit through a slog of information about the politics and about the world just to have a basic understanding to get into the story, because that way I'm already checked out, I'm already bored. I read so many books where it gives me so much information so quickly that I can't absorb it. I'm not going to remember it by the end. So bite-sized info dumps, I can at least handle that because it's at least like I'm learning along the way. But if you just give it to me all at the beginning, I'm checked out and I'm not going to have an easy time getting into the story. Okay, so here's some tropes that I can't stand. Pregnancy. Point blank period. I don't really like books about moms. I don't really like books about parenting. I do not like pregnancy. Pregnancy's scary. I don't want to read about it. Reading is my comfort zone. I don't want it. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I just am not interested. I don't want it. No thank you. I don't want a surprise pregnancy. I do not want an epilogue pregnancy. I do not want it in my fantasy. Oh my god. I don't want it. I'm not interested in any pregnancy almost ever. At least if it's not a surprise. Some of it I think I can handle, but even in like thrillers for the most part, I could do without. I don't need it. I don't want to talk about it. Another one. This one I read too often. Just too often it happens. And it is my biggest of pet peeves, and it will knock off an entire star from a rating. It could be a 5-star book. You have a villain monologue, it is instantly a 4, if not less. I can't do villain monologues. They're the worst. They're so unnecessary. If I can't learn the villain's reasoning for doing something through their actions or through a very quick conversation, I don't want it. I'm so sick of the villain just like spilling their guts to the protagonist or whoever else is around, just being like, oh yeah, I'm doing it because I'm silly and I'm evil and I love chaos. That's just so cool. For 3 pages, like, no. Get away from me with that. I don't want it. A great example of a very good book that I enjoyed, Whisper Down the Lane. Guess what? There was a villain monologue. Slight spoiler. The villain monologue is written within a letter, and our protagonist rips that letter up and throws it away. He never reads it, and still I had to sit through the entire villain monologue that wasn't even relevant. I didn't need it. It didn't affect the plot. I didn't sympathize with the villain or care. I hated it. And then there were none retellings. I can't stand the villain monologue. 9 Lives, perfect example. Not a great book to begin with, but had a villain monologue in a letter, and I hated it. It was so bad. It's terrible. It's like one of the worst things you could do to your story. Don't do it. These next 3, I want to say, are pretty standard things that people would not like in their books. Animal cruelty. I will read a book with it, but I do not want an excessive amount. I prefer warnings to it. I don't like it. It makes me feel really icky and sad. I'm super not a fan of animal cruelty, animal death, but it's not necessarily going to be a deal breaker for me. I'm just going to be upset for a little while. I also don't like sexual assault. To further the plot, to further character development. She can't be a badass unless she gets raped. Like, I don't like it. I don't want to read about it. I want to feel safe when reading books. Even if the book is dark and twisted, I don't want it for a plot device. It's the same with like mental health. I don't want the twist to be, ooh, they were mentally ill. I don't want the twist to be, ooh, sexual assault. I think that it can be done and put into books well, and there's a specific context that it's okay, and if it's handled well, I can accept it. But what's that book? Ninth House, for example, there is very explicit sexual assault flashbacks that really affected me and ruined the entire experience of the book, because this was when it was still very popular and the hype was really buzzing and no one was talking about the sexual assault talked about it, like, in the book. and it really ruined a lot of it for me. It really, it was such a shame because I really enjoyed the rest of the book, but like I can't get over that nauseating feeling that it's given me. It's just, it's ruined it. And it's not to say that it's not necessary to why, like, the character's experience, and it shouldn't not be put in stories. I just would like a better warning for it because I'm fragile and I need to look out for myself, and if it's not being talked about, it's hard to go into a story and then just be blindsided by these types of decisions and conversations. So don't love it, especially not if it's just to make the character a badass all of a sudden. And the last trope that I just really don't like in my books ever is the white savior complex, or just white people writing black stories in general. I don't love, oh, she's leaving. I don't love it when white women are writing white women being enslaved and the black people are like the superior race, or basically a retelling of history. I don't like it. I don't like the white savior complex in movies. I don't like it in my books. I think it is an injustice to everybody, and it just gives me the ick. I can't do it. I can't in good faith enjoy a book that does that, and I don't like it. It's not for me. It's not necessary. Let black people be the voices for black people and their experience. I just think that makes the most sense, and it's better for everybody if we just leave it that way, you know? I don't know. And now we're gonna get into my anti-buzzwords. Again, I don't have a lot. Pregnancy, anti-buzzword. Steer clear. I guess, I don't know. What's the difference of a trope and oh my god, am I okay? What is the difference of a trope and an anti-buzzword? Because I don't know. They're not tropes, but they're common things in books because they're tropes, but they're anyways, we're just gonna get into it. Tropes I dislike, and anti-buzzwords, same thing. Time travel, I don't typically enjoy it. Stolen time, I think is what the first book is. Didn't like it. Only a Monster, didn't hate it, but certainly did not love it. It was so-so. I didn't like the time travel. I have a really hard time enjoying time travel. But with that said, there's a few on my TBR that I hope to get to. Things like This Is How You Lose a Time War. A Time War. I really want to read that. I'm reading it this month. I'm really excited. But am I going to love it because there's time travel? I just don't know. With that said, the reason I have issues with saying, like, I just flat out don't like things is because there's always going to be the diamond in the dirt. The diamond in the rough. I don't like magical realism. It's not typically for me. I rarely enjoy it. It's always a okay time, but I've never loved one. Except for, I love the Before the Coffee Gets Cold trilogy. I love it so much. It is impeccable. All of them are 5 stars. I make everybody read them. They are some of my favorites. They have made me cry. And guess what? Time travel and magical realism. Make it make sense. I don't know. Everything else I read with time travel or magical realism never gets above a 3 stars. But some reason, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, excellent, wonderful, impeccable, could do no wrong. I don't get it. Another thing that I commonly see in magical realism, I'm unwell. Something else that I commonly see in magical realism is generational stories, generational fiction. Not for me. I attempted 100 Years of Solitude. I will revisit that, but I just didn't get into it, and so it's a softie enough because I just was not in a place to read such a book. The Inheritance of Orchidia Divina, it's great, but it wasn't for me. It's an impeccable book, but it's a generational magical realism that I just didn't like. I didn't love, but I acknowledge that it is like objectively a fantastic book and I will continue to recommend it. It just didn't work for me. I don't care enough. I don't feel there's enough time developed with generational stories for me to have a bond, to care. I think the best one that I've read so far is The Haunting of Alejandra, which it's still focused on like one main character with like flashbacks to ancestors. So it's a little bit different, but that's the only one that I've like okayed enough. Another thing that I think I'm learning to not like, which is really unfortunate for me, I do not think I am a Greek mythology girly. I read Song of Achilles and I didn't understand why it was so liked. It wasn't for me. It had some good, but for the most part it was really long and really boring and gory and horrific, and I just wasn't here for it personally. But I have a lot of mythology on my TBR shelf that I was really hopeful and excited to read, but the more that mythology retellings come out, the more I'm like, I don't care. I don't like it. I've never learned enough about Greek mythology to care. I don't really understand the origin stories. There's been a few that I loved, like Galatea. Impeccable. That is good. I will read short horror of Greek mythology, no problem, because that was really good. But a lot of them just like pique my interest, probably because the covers are beautiful, but they just fall flat because I don't care. I don't have a connection to the stories. It just means nothing to me, which is kind of unfortunate. Okay, this next one I don't think will be a shock. But I don't like books that have queer hate to further a plot. I'm looking at Razorblade Tears when I mention this. I did not like Razorblade Tears. I did not like the injustice of the LGBTQ community. It made me feel really icky, which is unfortunate because I know a lot of people love and adore Razorblade Tears. So I'm not saying this is a definitive bad thing because it worked for a lot of people. It just didn't work for me. It made me rather uncomfortable, and I didn't like the representation and the plot twists and all that jazz. It felt like a disservice from the beginning of the synopsis, and I knew, oh my god, there's a giant spider on the roof. I want to die. I found there was a small fucking spider on my eyelash earlier, and I was like, oh, there's just like a speck of something. It was a tiny spider. Oh, I don't like it. I'm having a hard time right now. Anyway, yeah, Razorblade Tears making me uncomfortable. I prefer queer norm, queer joy in my stories, and I think there's still room for hardships of being queer because that is relevant to a lot of plots and it makes sense and it's accurate, but I think to a point it doesn't always need to be there, and sometimes it's just doing more harm than it is good. But I think that you can have conversations. I think you also need to be listening to queer authors for those conversations though. So that's part of it. I'm not happy that it's crawling towards me. It's huge. I'm unwell. These next two are romance things that I don't really like. Marriage of Convenience. I know that this works for a lot of people. For me, it just doesn't feel fantastic. I don't love it, but I will read it. I think it just depends on the characters and their chemistry and if it's believable enough. But if not, then it's like a no from me, dog. The other one is, of course, we're going to end on like the most cliche, basic bitch answer. Love triangles. I love a love triangle, I'm going to be honest. But I don't love a love triangle with a clear, obvious winner and then someone else. I understand for the reader, like it's fun for us to have that, like, feel like we have a choice. We get a say in the feelings, but we don't. It's often the Edward who is clear, obvious winner. Jacob never stood a chance. It's not a love triangle. I want a love triangle like Iron Widow. That's a banger of a love triangle. It's incredible, and I highly recommend. That is how you do a love triangle. A love triangle is meant to be, everyone seems to have feelings for each other. You have feelings for someone, but they have feelings for someone else, and someone else has feelings for you. There's like a lot of emotions going on. There's a lot of connections happening. I feel like Twilight is a great example of a horrible love triangle because Jacob never stood a chance, and we all knew it. The movies did a bit better, but it just is one of those things that, like, there is no point. He's just a side character. We can have platonic side characters. Girls and boys can be friends in a book, and there not have to be a romance or long-lasting crush. Like, that can exist, and we can all be okay with that. I think that I'd rather see a very strong platonic friendship than a dumb, poorly thought out love triangle. But I know that they're incredibly popular, and again, Iron Widow, guys. Incredible. Perfect. That's how you do it. And that's like the only way you can really do it. So, that's all of my dislikes. Those are all the hates. Honestly, I don't have as many as I thought I would. I think just because this specific year I'm enjoying what I'm reading, but I haven't rated a whole lot of books poorly. I've had less than 5 1-stars in my life because I'm just generous, I think, but I also just haven't read things that I just like hate too much. But I would be curious to know, what are some of your least favorite tropes? What do you absolutely hate or despise in a book that's just gonna ruin it for you? I truly think like the worst thing for me is a villain monologue, and that feels like the nicest problem to have. But yeah, I'd be very curious to know, like, what pet peeves do you have in a book? What's gonna make you dislike it? What's gonna lower the rating for you? I'm genuinely so curious because I have a lot of things that I love in books, and I don't have a lot of things that I dislike in books, and I'm willing to try everything. I think that's a big part of it, is that I'm still pretty early on in my like reading career since getting back into it, and so I'm willing to just try and pick up everything, and even if I don't love something, I can probably find something that I will like. So it's hard to say, but thank you for hanging out with me and watching this. The next video on Tuesday is going to be my things I love in books, which is going to be a lot more fun because I have a lot of answers for those. It's going to be a lot of fun buzzwords and tropes that I just adore, things that I really enjoy. But until then, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in my next video soon. Bye!